You're going to see a lot of businesses die this year, next year. What comes after a hype cycle is a burst of a bubble. 2023 was certainly the year of AI is magic.
2024 could be characterized, but where's my ROI? Focus of the big technology companies on marketing is kind of agent. The marketing around that is going to run way ahead of actually what's delivered.
Magic, garbage fire, two ends of the continuum.
Are we doing ourselves a disservice by being so serious about ROI?
We don't want to create more noise ourselves surrounding the magic of AI. However, we get feedback on our product today that is verbatim, this is magic.
When you get to multi-step complex workflows, there are two things that I think you need to have in your mind philosophically, especially when you're thinking about professional industries like real estate. Firstly,
just because you were burned by one product that had AI in the name, there's other stuff out there, so treat it like you would, a beautiful buffet of AI selections. Didn't like the first one, try a few others.
We're dropping the AI very deliberately, fifth dimension, and that's a statement on our view of where we believe the world is going, and that is...
So here we are at the end of season 1 of Bricks, Bytes, and Bold Moves, the future of real estate. The CEO of Fifth Dimension, Dr. Kate Jarvis, and I'm here today with my lovely co-founder, the CPO, Johnny Morris.
Hello.
Hi. Good to actually be talking together in this way.
Yes, yeah. Two hosts on one episode.
Yeah, we'll try really hard not to just talk over each other the whole time, but I think that's probably part of a fireside chat environment,
Yes,
so it's okay.
Quite.
So I guess the first thing that I want to get into, I know some of your thoughts and feels about this, but I think there's a lot to really dig into, is what's happened over the past year in 2024. Look, internet, I know we're kind of beyond retros now that we're half into January, but I think you'll forgive us because it's just the early part of a new financial year. Like, how do you feel having spent the past year building Fifth Dimension AI at a high point in the hype cycle for AI generally? A lot of perhaps skepticism starting to enter the scene in a different way than perhaps when you and I were working in the business in 2023. And what have we learned from our customers? What have we learned from the market?
Yeah, so I think if I were to say the sort of macro environment from the people we talk to and work with and our customers, that 2023 was like boundless optimism. And I think 2024 is kind of a bit of could be characterized, but where's my ROI? So I think we've been speaking to a lot of people who kind of have been trialing generalist tools, trying to build some stuff in-house, and have kind of come away with I can see moments of magic, but I can't get to the outcome I want. Meanwhile, I think that's what we've really nailed in 2024. We've found the places where we can really add tangible value to our customers and double down on that. And I think a key kind of underlying differentiator that we don't talk about that often in a wider sense, because it's nuanced, but it's key for the actual experience, is being able to do the same thing twice. So being able to say, go from, hey, I've got a bundle of leases, for a building, I've got 10 tenants here, and I need to fill in a rent roll. And maybe on a good day, I can spend a few hours and get this done in a generalist tool once in the way I want. But actually, I just want that to work every time. I don't want to have to go on a 6-week prompt engineering course and kind of become a developer and learn to code. I want a product that delivers for me today. And as a user, I'm happy to meet somewhere in the middle, but not actually become a developer, which I think is kind of where a lot of the kind of background expectations are and have been for 2024. It's like, it's fine. Just learn prompt engineering. Just get better. Just learn more things about this quite technical discipline and all your problems will be solved. I think people are finding that actually that's neither true necessarily nor possible for most users. So you need that package, that product that's going to actually solve your use case, solve your problems.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. So first of all, my experience is 2023 was certainly the year of AI is magic.
Yeah.
And then that rapidly collided with the reality of
all the
people.
purple and the wands and the sparkles.
Exactly. We saw so many websites with no description of use cases or customers of companies with hundreds of millions of funding building in the AI space and felt excited because something was happening. Elon Musk said so. OpenAI was interested, right? There was tons and tons of money pouring into the space for better and for worse. But as soon as anyone, especially in enterprise businesses, tried a tool, whether it was a personal version of ChatGPT that they then, got one really good response from, as you said, with a lot of labor-intense kind of process being involved, then tried to do it again, or tried to do something slightly different and perhaps more difficult in a human-like way, like looking across 4 documents instead of looking at one. And then they were deeply disappointed, if not frustrated to the point of wanting to throw their laptops out. Of course, those of us, as you say, who are technologists are watching this saying like, but don't lose the parts of it that are good.
Yes, absolutely.
The ROI is there and always has been there. You just had the wrong lens, let's say, or a difficult approach with which to engage with the technology and end up somewhere where you were happy at the end. But I would say for me, the big customer insight is probably actually to go harder on tamping people's expectations down of the technology earlier in the sales cycle and more globally. And I hate that. And I hate that because a lot of people in that camp are just naysayers. They're the same types of people, superficially, that'll be like, oh, never use this. It's garbage, right? Magic, garbage fire, 2 ends of the continuum. And they're saying garbage fire, we're high level, 100 million turnover business. We manage some of the most important assets in New York City and beyond. Like, we're just not going to use any other supplier for this for the foreseeable future because we know it sucks. And I obviously don't believe that.
Yeah.
So what's your take on like trying to get through those 2 perspectives and find the right path for proving ROI and leaning into what we think are key differentiators in the space?
I think for a starting point, not many people have got the dial down the magic memo.
Darn.
I think the response from, the big research labs, the big technology companies to some of the cynicism is like, hey, let's just lean into agents. Let's just make bigger promises harder, faster, and like, I think it was perhaps reported with a bit of hysteria, but you take kind of how Sam Altman is presenting his recap of the year, which is like, hey, we know how to get to AGI and we're focusing on superintelligence now. It's very much dialing up the magic promise. Microsoft, who's obviously on their kind of agent marketing loop now, which are all cool, exciting stuff, but it's definitely presented as magic without much consideration for the gap of the like Copilot user right today. And I guess I still have yet to meet any, most of the people we work with and meet and talk to have done some kind of Copilot trial, right? I've still yet to meet the user who said to me, I loved it. I got value. I saved a few hours a day. It was great. The best I've got is like a meh. Like, yeah, I drafted an email 2 days ago and it was a bit quicker. It was kind of okay. But, and there's always a but. So for me, it's all about specificity and talking about the actual outcomes and the actual use cases. So I think it's much less interesting for most people to hear about, this amazing Gen AI product that's going to transform how they work versus really making it real and saying, like, how many hours does it take you to pull together a rent roll? Like 4, 5 on a big deal? How long does it take to check that? What if you could get that back in 10 minutes? And it's that kind of, look, someone's done the work for you, the kind of the technology, the product thinking, and we're going to help you get there. So for me, it's all about specificity.
Yeah, I think there are 2 things that I'd like to pick up on there. The first is perhaps unsexy observation. The magic of AI is in handling complex tasks well, but that doesn't mean replacing all of the work that the individual would be doing in them before,
absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
And when I say it that way, part of what I'm aiming at, of course, is the work that you and I do and the work that our AI Ellie does is actually not that different in its experience in some ways for the user or its outcomes, time savings, efficiency, operational efficiency, et cetera, than the past 50 years of enterprise SaaS sales. We are driving at a similar goal, drawing on a different toolbox, and then there's the fundamentally different UIX. So how does that all come together?
Yeah. I mean, the ultimate value we're delivering and aiming to deliver for our clients is how can we help you hit your core metrics better, right? And level one of that is how can we get the people in your business, the experts in your business, like the investment analysts that deeply understands the retail dynamics right now in New York in different categories. How can we give them more time back so that they can kind of pursue your business outcomes? That's kind of level one. And then level two, which is a bigger opportunity, I think, for most, is like how can we help that same analyst make better decisions? And how when that analyst is sitting in a IC meeting, going through the IC memo they prepared with their team, can they get to a better outcome and a better decision? So I think focusing on those core metrics is massive. UI is an interesting one because that's kind of a step forward. Like, what's the most common response you get from people when they see an email interaction?
I think, hey, someone has just emailed me from my business. That's really useful. Oh, wait, it's your AI. And so I think there's this kind of seamless understanding, which is interesting to me because, of course, it's asynchronous.
Yeah.
And chat is synchronous-ish. And that's actually, I think, at least in most people's mental models, more like a human interaction as a result. But if you think about it, especially not us, right? People who aren't on Slack all day, every day or WhatsApping each other in real time, the primary way that they communicate with people in their business is email. So when they receive an email from Ellie, and it contains most, if not all, of the components that they would want from an analysis of a set of documents, an outcome or an output that's more put together in, let's say, a template, a lease abstraction template, a rent roll, an IC memo, they just feel like it's visceral, right? I've just had a 10, 15-minute maximally, depending on how many terabytes of data that it's processing in the background. I've just accomplished a task that normally takes 10 more stakeholders, 4 more iterations, whatever it is, in under 20 minutes. And that is magic. The emotional reaction to that is that's amazing. And it also feels like just a slightly different version of what's already happening in the business, which tends to make it feel less scary, more joyful, and raise fewer questions, I think, than staring at a chatbot does and watching it load characters.
It's interesting. It's polarizing, though, right, with email. I feel like if I were to kind of chunk people into categories and think about how they respond.
Well, I obviously wasn't talking about VCs.
No, quite. But I think the end user tends to be excited about email. And I think it unlocks a kind of there's a general malaise, isn't there? Or general fatigue of, another web UI, another place I need to log into. I was talking to someone managing one of the internal tools at one of the big agencies, and they were saying their most common support request was, what's the URL again? Of course, along with password resets. So there's a sort of almost like a visceral release, and I hear this so often, and it's like, so I can work with it from Outlook and on my phone, and I don't have to learn a new web interface, which then carries on to kind of day-to-day use. But it's interesting because I think some of the kind of more technology or focus kind of implementers that we speak to, like the innovation team and the kind of technology team, are just a bit like, but I don't get email. Why is it an email? I'm not so natively email. I don't use email as much for my work, et cetera, et cetera. And it's interesting having that there's definitely a gap between those profiles, isn't there?
Yeah, and I would say, obviously, I spend a lot of time talking to the directors, the MDs, the executives who have their own AI strategies, nascent ones usually in place they want to collaborate on, and are thinking about how that filters down to the end user. And I think it just frankly feels less innovative, right?
Right, yeah, because it's familiar, right? It's, yeah. There's no sparkles.
Right. And if you're the one who's taking this back to the board.
There are sparkles, but
there are sparkles,
yeah.
but they're different. And so if you're trying to propose, hey, we're going to situate ourselves within the marketplace as being, one of the earliest adopters of this mission critical technology in the new world in which most businesses are built with AI at its center, and then the product you actually show them is our email interface, you can sort of get why it's a little bit less exciting, even though, as you say, it has a barrier to adoption for the general people using it that's lower. And I think you and I have therefore punted down the road a different type of UI/UX for a long time. But I do think one of the things that's most important to me about the future of building our product and exposing more of what it can do to more people is, yes, email isn't, let's say, auditable in the way that a web UI is, where it tracks a lot of stuff that a lot of people in your business are doing, requests that are being made, and so on. And so one argument that I think is really solid is, hey, because we're so early in this AI journey, and let's say I'm the COO of this business, shouldn't I easily know how people are using your product?
I think, though, there's a few things that you can cover that off through the wrapper around your product, right? Because as an enterprise business, we're selling a software product supported by expertise service people. And so usage and analytics, it's all there in the background. We just deliver it through the kind of support and customer success world. There are elements, though, there are limitations to email. And we're building around that. There is a sort of what we would think of as a sort of support interface. For example, you can't do document management through email. So if you want Ellie to maintain a record, to keep the documents for your latest deal, and you've got, there's maybe 500 documents, PDFs, spreadsheets, images, all the usual stuff. That's not something that's easy to chuck onto an email. And if you want to sync with Box or Dropbox, you want to see what's going on. So we have a web UI for those kind of interactions, to understand file management, and that works really well. It's complementary, of course. It's interesting. I think over time, because we're still early days with that question of how do we need to interface with a AI coworker? What's the best interface? And so over time, that will evolve and change. The personification really helps users and really helps people get their head around it. And that philosophy of being where you're working already also kind of helps people get their head around it and changes the kind of framing, I think, from, I need to learn how to be a prompt engineer, I need to be a technologist for me to get value from this, to, look, I can send an email to Ellie, or I can make this request and I can get these two versions of my kind of zoning permits compared in a second, and it will save me a couple of hours. And it's a nice, easy on-route. So that kind of journey is really important. That modification. I think one of the things, it comes back to the thing we were talking about earlier. Are we doing ourselves a disservice by being so serious about ROI and not focusing on magic? Cynically, we could choose to make the thing that, the innovation and the board see look extremely sparkly and magical. And demos are relatively easy to produce these days versus actual products.
I think you're accusing some products of being vaporware, which they definitely are.
Yeah, absolutely. But we work in a world where there's more vaporware and magic and higher production, higher magic kind of seeming, oh my God, that's amazing, wow moments. And it's our job to kind of cut through that. And we do it by being relatively serious and focused. But maybe we're too serious on that. Maybe we should be,
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think we share an allergic reaction to what happens in the world where we don't want to create more noise ourselves surrounding the magic of AI. However, we get feedback on our product today that is verbatim, this is magic. right? This has saved me personally, 10 hours a week. You could put a price on that, and we do.
Yeah.
And I'm just one person on a team of people, right, who are using this AI. And so it is a tough line to ride, I think, and there might be slightly different messaging for different people. But I think as our business moves forward and the conversations or hype around AI is cut through by people who aren't just us, we might be more comfortable leaning into the message of, there's some showmanship involved. You should have fun using Ellie.
Yeah.
If you're not having fun using Ellie, we have failed.
Yes.
And so that is something over and above just an email interface, just being able to process or output document types like an XLS or a doc, but editing an image.
XLSM. Macros.
But I think that's a nice sort of way of starting to touch on how we view ourselves in the marketplace and what we think is happening with AI generally. So why don't we talk a bit about, cool, it's 2025. What is useful about AI and to whom today? Where do we see its uptake? Where do we see it really failing to deliver on its promise, perhaps outside of real estate or within it? And where do we fit ourselves into that mix?
It's a good question. Like, what's the future? What's the future for where that intersection between artificial intelligence and real estate? There's still the overarching. I think we should sort of break this down by starting to talk about the overarching technology environment. Like, what's happening with kind of new models, with the packaging around them, and the pace of change in marketing is still as high as it ever has been. However, the pace of change in the model layer, the kind of leap forwards, the massive leap forwards in like, hey, the original I'm thinking about here is like going from GPT-2 to GPT-3 and 4. And like, hey, this is like a totally different paradigm. And it's happened in 3 months or 6 months. That slowed down. So there's lots of really exciting changes to the underlying technology, but they're not coming at the like, oh, right, let's throw away everything we've built and just plug in a new model. Hooray.
Yeah.
They're coming much more around the like, okay, so maybe this model works a bit better now with longer documents or longer windows. Maybe we can kind of take a look at how the sort of post-training in this model and kind of improve its performance on this specific task. So we're getting into the area where I guess there's more subtlety and nuance.
Yes. As a Silicon Valley nerd, I think I would say transformer methods, amazing innovation, kind of topped out, right?
Yeah.
Now what we're doing is building technology that facilitates different types of interactions with LLMs. We're building infrastructure around it that gets different outputs from them. But as they are today, right, we're kind of approaching some sort of asymptote of great, better processing power, it's faster, we can have suddenly a context window that's super large and that's going to solve all of our problems.
Yeah.
So what's next?
What's next? So I think this year, what has really happened in 2024 is the kind of reliable reasoning that you can get out of these models has increased. To the point where, we talked about magic earlier. Like, both of us obviously spend all day working with this kind of technology in many different use cases. And I still regularly have moments where I'm surprised or I'm like, oh my God, the number of reasoning steps we were able to get through to understand the current obligations for the landlord here is like 17 steps. And that would have literally taken me, I think I probably would have had to print it out. Pen and paper, print it out, like draw lines between things. So, and I think that is important because that means that we can help get into more kind of longer pieces of work or multiple step workflows. So what will happen over 2025 will be we'll start seeing more steps pulled together, which most of us talk about as agents. So generally, when you hear the word agent, someone is saying, "Okay, we're going to have a intelligent system that can do a number of steps." Like the one everyone goes to by default is research, holidays, come up, find flights, and then book you your perfect holiday for a fraction of the price, kind of thing. In real estate, that might be stepping through a risk scorecard for a deal and kind of running through the 5 to 6, 7 steps. Now, and that's going to be the focus of the marketing as well. So I think what will happen, it's already happening. The focus kind of the big technology companies on marketing is kind of agent, particularly Microsoft, right? However, the sort of their agents right now are very focused on like booking a meeting, all that kind of basic stuff. And I think the marketing around that's going to run way ahead of actually what's delivered. Because when you get to multi-step complex workflows, there are two things that I think you need to have in your mind philosophically, especially when you're thinking about professional industries like real estate. Firstly, where does the expertise come from? So how does the system understand the industry, your domain, and your current context? And that's not something that comes for free. That has to be built in and engineered. And secondly, how is the human's expertise being leveraged here? And so I think we'll see a big push for kind of, hey, we'll just not think too much about the human and see how far the technology can go. And I don't think that will create a bundle of useful products. I think where the real value will be created is where you're saying, okay, how can I take the domain expertise, the relevant data, the relevant information, and then build out with the human in the loop, their guidance, their support, ultimately their kind of decision-making, the best possible outcome. And that's what we'll be working on. So there is some bias there. And also what I'm really excited about. And I think the underlying technology will continue to support that through more subtle improvements.
I think one critical observation for me is that a lot of the concern, some of it viable and legitimate and some of it not, surrounding AI displacing jobs, replacing humans, etc. Anytime you say, no, what we're doing genuinely is made better, i.e. the outcome for the business is better, the individual enjoys their job more, makes more money for the business, etc. So at both levels of the business, things are better. If you include a human in a loop, I think people think we're just saying that because it's a marketing ploy, right?
Yeah.
We just don't want to sound like we're here to like fire half of your business, but actually it's true. And that kind of
I think anyone that knows us would know we don't feel that obligation just to be nice. Like, you know, it seems like the nice thing to do to be like, hey, it's fine. It's just there's not really a risk to kind of your role here because this and this, but like it's a genuine belief, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's actually the keystone to realizing value, if we're going to go back to ROI, I think, of any AI product, AI native product in the Gen AI world is actually having a human in the loop.
Yeah.
And I think that if we can help people understand that better, both through making it more obvious in our product's UI/UX and explaining as we interact with more customers and potential customers worldwide, I think that shift in narrative is actually really important to unlocking value. I think we're standing in our own way because we are still fighting against people who continue to worry about what's going to happen to the 10 heads in my business who fill analyst roles today, or more globally, yes, I'm trying to protect sort of by reskilling, getting ahead of my organization, thinking through sustainability plans. That's what I'm focused on, rather than being focused on AI is changing the world. Let's think about how we are changing our world along with AI.
There's sort of an inconvenient mental hurdle you have to get over in that question that won't fundamentally change ever, I think, because we're all human, is the team doing something useful today?
Yes.
And I don't think anyone would disagree with this fundamentally, but might disagree locally. Not everyone is doing useful work, right? So I think what's quite difficult for some is to kind of say, well, I like that team, they're doing some stuff, but is it actually adding value to our business? And so when you then throw in like, oh, and actually we can radically change how we work, for some, like we talked to Vanessa about this in an earlier episode. For some, that's wildly exciting, and she can see that opportunity and instantly wants to drive towards it. For others, it's just another layer of complexity and layer angle, and like how do I navigate that? How do I even work through that?
Yeah, and I think there's a great parallel. So as with Katie Palanchar, right, we talked about how early in her career she had a strong case for ROI, easy sale, right? But of course, it's not actually what people care about. It's the stated concern, but it's not necessarily the thing that will unlock the emotional buy-in to a long-term strategic partnership.
Goes in the business case that the CFO signs.
Exactly.
But,
But I think we are all in this place where we want to forge a new future. And even if that is not immediately realized by ROI, we have to admit there's going to be 3 months, 6 months, 12 months of human learning within the business and in working with your first 3 AI suppliers. And especially in a macroeconomic down cycle, that's a little bit tough to bite, right?
Yeah, it's not easy. I mean, I think the tough environment maybe increases the need, but again, connecting those two together.
So how do we think as we move forward? Let's talk about maybe 2026. How are people going to interact with AI? How are they going to feel about it?
Well, I would probably not use the word AI in that word in 2026.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. Well, I mean, how are people going to react with technology? So we've just rebranded, and we've been calling ourselves Fifth Dimension AI for the last few years. And we're dropping the AI very deliberately, Fifth Dimension. And that's a statement on our view of where we believe the world is going. And that is that all of the technology we interact with will be more intelligent. We'll have kind of intelligence built in, primarily through, the existing architectures that we know and kind of current large language models made cleverer and smaller and more useful and other machine learning methods, but also in future, all the cool new stuff that will emerge. But I think the baseline level will be our technology is more intelligent. And that will start in our pockets, of course, already is. I think, you can see some of the most cutting edge, difficult to deliver kind of intelligent features already on your Android phone. Like just circle some stuff to search, edit an image with your finger, basically. Like there's lots of clever stuff already there. But I think that will become more the baseline. And then it will be a bit of I think there'll be a bit of a kind of, a bit of a division of those who are building that in to their business technology. Like I'm remembering when the shift from iPhone to BlackBerry. No, other way around. Gosh, that would be a step back. The shift from BlackBerry to iPhone. People were bringing their personal iPhones to work and loading stuff onto it to get around the limitations of their BlackBerries for years, for absolutely years. And eventually everyone got on board and got there. But I think in 2026, we'll live in a duality where you've got the businesses who are starting to starting to act on their Gen AI journey today, who actually are changing and transforming and getting more value from it. And then you'll get those who are waiting and watching or sticking their heads in the sand, who are kind of confused why their team are also grumpy. And they will be grumpy because you're not giving them access to good technology, to the intelligence they're going to get used to really quickly. And they're like, why do I have to manually tap this out? Why do I have to go and find these documents? I know that if I went and worked for my buddy over at this asset manager doesn't have to do any of that anymore. He's spending most of his time building out their theses and making kind of better decisions. So I think we'll see that two-speed world in the enterprise, but that baseline level of intelligence in kind of consumer tech.
Yeah,
What do you think?
Good question. My immediate response is that healthcare is a good analogy for this, right?
Okay.
Where oftentimes early in the days of, say, AI native note takers,
Yeah.
there are so many GPs, for better and for worse, who are like, I don't care if I personally have to pay for this.
Yeah.
Literally, it creates so much leverage for me in my job that I'm going to do it. Maybe it's in a regulatory or moral gray area. I'm still going to do it, right? And that was the way in which the industry started to get strong-armed into adopting these technologies, right, at a more kind of corporate level or organizational level. And my prediction would be the same thing is going to happen in real estate, right?
So, well, I mean, we're seeing it already, right?
Exactly.
We're sort of the independent decision makers, the sort of, the parts of the really big international real estate businesses that can do what they like are starting to pop up and being like, hey, I know we can't do a multinational giant enterprise deal, but we could get our team on, right? We could get sort of this team license done. Yeah. SME within a giant enterprise.
Well, exactly. And I think part of the beauty of that is that then when we talk to corporate leaders, let's say, at those organizations in the next 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, those organizations are going to be set up for success in a totally different way, right, than ones that haven't had this kind of grassroots movements towards AI, because they'll have learned some prompt engineering. Yeah. They'll have been along for the journey of magic to garbage fire.
Yes, yeah.
They'll have found the right use cases that they can then say, we know it works for this today. We think it will work for that tomorrow. And the change or innovation can then be driven from within rather than from outside of that organization. And I think that sometimes when we talk about those two modes of adoption, the two types of businesses that we're going to see over 2025 or 2026, it just doesn't land for people how deep or wide that schism can be. But it's precisely, I think, for that reason that there are individuals who are getting farther and farther and farther along on this journey. And the more of those individuals you have at your business, the more likely you are to have 10x or 100x returns, right, 10 years from now than those other businesses.
How far away do you think we are from this, the kind of, because I think the thing I'm really confident on is that the impact a single person can have is being amplified massively. And we benefit from this in our team, right? Like we building a business from scratch with this technology from kind of day one. As technologists, gives you huge opportunity to amplify the impact of your people. So I'm really confident in the future where people's individual impact they can have and the kind of value they can bring is massively increased. That's at some point going to change the structure of most industries, I think. Where do we feel real estate is going to be? Like, where are how far away are we from like the sort of dynamics of how the industry works now changing? Or is the sort of fundamental money flows in the industry so deeply entrenched and so tied to the physical built place that maybe we'll see less change than in other places?
I think the somewhat measured but probably most likely to be true answer is that the adoption of AI native technologies or technologies full stop is going to accelerate what you see already happening in multinational enterprises within real estate, right? Yeah. So CBRE agents over here might have a totally different decision-making process for purchasing.
People agents, not AI agents.
Exactly. People agents, real estate agents, brokers, as you would say in some areas of the world, versus a different part of that organization. When an organization grows large enough, it always devolves governance in some way. So then do we say that you might be large enough in an AI native world at 15 people to devolve governance and have more sort of full stack, full real estate value chain operators at a much, much smaller business? Yes. Yeah. I think that will happen probably in the next 5 to 10 years.
Yes, I definitely see that.
What other predictions do you have for 2026?
What other predictions? I feel like I've gone heavier on predictions here. I want to hear more of yours, Kate.
Okay.
I mean, also, like, what a good way to frame this is like, what's not going to happen?
What's not going to happen? There's not going to be a robot in every home doing your chores. I think we all really hoped that was going to happen.
Yeah.
But it's
my dishwasher won't have legs.
Yeah, exactly. it's sort of with the Roomba, right? There's going to be stuff going on.
I do have a robot hoover, actually.
Yeah.
But I have a ground floor flat with no carpets.
And you
so
still
it's
have
wonderful.
a housekeeper. So let's be honest,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So the difference is, like, is that technology going to replace a fundamental human service function? No. Is it going to augment it, especially for a certain moneyed part of the population? Yes.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot going on with talk about AI, where it's going to be headed. And generally, I think a lot of that stuff is going to take more like 30 years to manifest. But it's being talked about as if it were a 5 or 7 year timeline for mostly political reasons, right?
It's like self-driving cars 10, 15 years ago. It feels very similar, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Extremely similar. I think that's a perfect analogy. And then I also think that we underplay how innovative people are. And one of the most interesting things, right, about looking at, let's say, Lyft, Uber, et cetera, in the early days, now self-driving cars as part of a set of innovations towards distributing access to a service that most people otherwise would not economically have access to, right? Get car, whether a human drives it or not. Yeah. Get concierge service to place, right? Like, that is a model that we're going to start seeing with AI again, but it's going to be very slow. And also, part of the reason why it's slow is that people find different things to do. So I guess one of my most interesting, armchair musings about 2026 is if we kind of flip on its head the idea that people lose their jobs and instead frame it as, what are people going to start creating as products, as vision, as industries. There could be whole new, sets of arbitrage because people are no longer doing these things. What are those things going to be? And I don't have a good idea of what that might be yet, but I do think that there's going to be a lot of a space for people perhaps to develop their own IP. So we could be talking about a world in which, because AI is native to everything that we do and all devices that we use and things like this, like, are we all inventors? This is actually a question I ask myself a lot. Because if you have an AI with you all of the time, you can sort of make a lot of stuff from scratch, whether it's a piece of software, whether it's building a chair that's better than IKEA, or a lot of other things. I love creative industries, and a lot of people, again, are worried about the impact of AI on creative industries. I think we actually might be moving to a universe in which we're all part of the creative industry. That's exciting.
I'm now imagining talking to my daughter in like 30 years and her being like, you just used to buy standard chairs that were custom designed for your height and body?
Exactly. Like, what a ridiculous idea in a world in which we all have AI in our pocket all the time.
I often think about websites in this journey, and not just because we've spent all of the care, time, and effort of like really improving and rebuilding our own, so it's on the mind. But if you think about the sophistication and complexity and depth, and ultimately how much useful information is on a typical website now, today, versus 5, 10, 15 years ago, like, it's almost a different concept. A page with some writing and maybe a picture on, to sophisticated kind of narrative told via your web browser, right, is the kind of journey. And I think we'll see that journey with everything we do, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, my personal analog is I think about how many times I've attempted to learn how to actually use Adobe products, gotten mad, and then stopped.
Yes, yeah.
Like, that is not a problem that will ever recur in the same way in the future, which I think is exciting. But I guess we should...
I think that might take longer to manifest. But this all maps to the built place, right? Because you were talking about chairs, slightly tongue-in-cheek, but I think that's actually a really good example. I'm pretty sure that will be what happens. But the built environment we live in is not personalized and doesn't change very fast. And we've never had the tools to do that. And perhaps this is beyond 2026. But if you apply that logic to, giving that creative power to every property owner or property manager or someone sitting in an office, like, that should, in my mind, that leads to a world where we can have much more buildings that do what we want, basically. and more comfortable, more useful, more adaptive. How we get there will be quite the journey. But I'm pretty sure that the underlying intelligence, that creative technology, will unlock a whole wave of sort of personalization and making buildings, whether residential, commercial, or anything, more fit for purpose.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way of bringing the conversation home, because I think based on who we talk to a lot of the time for our AI, we're thinking at a very high level, right? The building as an asset that accrues value over time, which is important,
or even
right?
the portfolio of 2,000 buildings.
Exactly. But I think even in those cases, right, we can very clearly see a future where basis point optimization on a real estate portfolio also benefits and is fed, in fact, by sort of the bottom-up realization of a built world environment that is more bespoke and services more people in a bespoke way.
Absolutely. And the service wrapped around it. I think that's the key thing, right? If you think about, the people, let's talk about an office, you're thinking about the people that run that office. If you amplify their impact, they can create a much better service and experience for you to go through as well. It's the whole thing.
Amazing. Any final takeaways that we should leave our audience with?
What do we want to leave them to think about for 2025? I mean, I'm tempted to say, open up Google Photos or Apple Photos and try and find the AI editing features and see what you think. But perhaps that's not super practical, but that's what comes to mind first.
Yeah, I would say if you're going to try a product, do it now, do it yesterday. And it could be something, like you're saying, very simple and always accessible to you.
Yeah.
So you can get a feel for both the art of the possible and the immediate value return. So I use, for example, Fixer AI for email.
Yeah.
And because I do send an enormous amount of email, it started out being crap, but actually over 30, 60, 90 days has been amazing, which I think is a nice journey for people to go on that helps them understand the difference between magic and garbage fire and where we're currently at with the technology. I think the other thing for me is don't lose hope. You're going to see a lot of businesses die, right? This year, next year, what comes after a hype cycle is a burst of a bubble, right? We've got the bubble. It's going to burst. The outcomes of that are going to be many. But I think what is really important to me is just because you were burned by one product that had AI in the name, whether that was vaporware AI or real AI, there's other stuff out there. So treat it like you would, a beautiful buffet of AI selections. Didn't like the first one, try a few others.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's a good example. Fixer AI doesn't work for me because I don't have enough emails, essentially. It technically works, but it doesn't deliver the value. So that point of, unlike past technology, AI does things that surprise you and does actually improve as you use it. So there is this element of I remember talking to users that had the early days when everyone's kind of talking about content generation, primary use case, who would kind of fixate on there being one word they didn't like in a page draft of a blog. And then be like, I can't believe they use that word. That's really not right. And then using that as a reason to kind of stop. But actually, I think you need to lean in there because you get surprising outcomes, and maybe they're not ideal. But actually, if you keep going, you can understand and kind of learn and get to the really great stuff. And I guess the consequence of creativity and intelligence is unexpected outcomes in a very small local way. You're like, oh, okay, I wasn't expecting that. That's quite useful. Or maybe it's not, but yeah.
Nice. Yeah, I think the wrapper I'd put on that is essentially not to think of AI like a junior employee, right? But truly like a co-operator, an employee of a high level that you really respect, but that has really spiky talents and weaknesses. Yeah. And there's so much room for that person in your life,
has some really big strengths.
Really great strengths.
But not universal.
Not universal. So, we'll make mistakes.
So go find those strengths and lean into them. It's funny, this is part of our hiring philosophy, right? Focus on the strengths. Yeah.
Exactly. Cool. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah,
we should do this again next year.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Bye.